All right, welcome to the LongBox Paradox. It's a special creator spotlight, and I'm Dan, your host, joined by Gambit at Gambit's Inc. And we have our guest, Steve Orlando. You know him from such titles as Midnighter, Justice League of America, Undertow. You did a bunch of one-shots, too, with Batman and Martian Manhunter you were on for a while, Supergirl, like... You got a lot of titles you worked on, but we're here for Commanders in Crisis and also to discuss the poll as well.
Awesome.
We'll get to
I've been all over, like you said.
Yeah.
But mostly doing independent stuff now.
Is that because of the current way the comic industry is going that you decided it's time to go independent, or you got enough of a name built from DC and the other big two to kind of work your way into your name's known that you can branch out now?
I just wanted a new challenge. I'm still working at DC, and we hope that there'll be work coming out from Marvel soon. I mean, I had some stuff there, but due to the pandemic, it's on pause. And that stuff is great, but I just need to challenge myself in a different way. When I go to DC, when you're working for the big two, it's a huge privilege. It's a huge responsibility, but you're adding to something that's been there for decades and decades and decades. And when you leave, it doesn't come with you, and so you gotta find a way to do both. You got to build your own worlds that are going to follow you wherever you go. So it's not it's not a response to any one thing in particular, other than I've been in now for 6 years full time, and it's time to start building some stuff in addition to my work for hire, that's truly mine, that I built from the ground up.
Definitely, I've loved the grassroots marketing you've been doing for your titles. Especially, I always know a creator believes in what they're putting out with how much they're promoting it. And Commanders in Crisis, you were out there, just every day promoting, giving out the PDFs to people to talk about it. Josh Williamson did that with Nailbiter and Ghosted. He was out there, every day promoting them.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I see a creator get behind something, I definitely want to, check out that book at least. And Commanders in Crisis was breakneck paced. Jennifer, thank you for joining us. We have Steve here.
Hi. And Gambit, a familiar face.
Hi.
Hi.
We just started getting into creator own, kind of moving from the big two to kind of own what he's doing.
Yeah.
And kind of the pandemic stuff. How much has the pandemic affected your work?
Well, on one hand, everything that goes on, in the world, pandemic or not, if you're tuned in, you're writing about what's on your mind. It's going in. So in that respect, yeah, even if you're not doing a book that's about the pandemic, you're doing a book that's about the pandemic. But at the same time, I can't complain. We've been pretty lucky, actually. Freelancers, not much in my life changed, except that I used to have one time a day I would go see other people when I went to the gym, and now I can't do that. But otherwise, I was ready. I was already a recluse, getting my groceries delivered, and people used to call me lazy, and now I was ahead of the curve.
So everyone who started working from home, you're first time, huh?
No, honestly, working freelance, we were very lucky because I already know how to stay on task. I already know how to build my own schedules, how to sort of separate work-life balance, even though it all happens in the same place. So we've honestly been pretty lucky.
Is it hard for you to kind of stay on a schedule when you were first starting out with I have to write so many pages a day and then try and balance your work and personal life?
It is a challenge, but luckily I sort of went from working a full-time job and having hard hours in the day that I would write to not having a full-time job otherwise, but I just expanded those hours. There wasn't a time when I didn't have to really build in the schedule because since I started trying to break in when I was between 12 and 13, my mentor had always said, barring emergencies, obviously, write every day. If you don't treat this like a job, it's never going to be a job. And, he was very, as I like to say, lovingly brusque. But it's true. So I'd been building my own schedule for a long time, even though, part of that schedule would be whatever I was doing for my day job.
I mean, we've always heard like the legendary tale Jack Kirby was drawing 8 pages a day, which, like, you think about it, it's just like there's no way. It's insane.
That's insane.
Well, I'm not drawing 8 pages a day, but I'm frequently on time. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm lucky too, in that was demystified for me at an early age by the people that taught me how to write. There's certainly folks that, I don't know, act like it's sorcery, and the sorcery part is when you're doing the ideating and you're outlining the story and you're coming up with the idea. But at the same time, once you've done that and you've outlined your story, the implementation of it doesn't have to be magic. It can be like, oh, I must do 10 pages today because that's what I have to do to make it on time. So it's a creative endeavor 100%, but aspects of it don't have to necessarily like be mystified in that way. I've had plenty of bosses in former jobs that acted like they had to like buy a cabin in the woods and take all their clothes off and light candles for 4 days. And maybe after like 4 days, they could maybe start to write. And I always remember that, because to be frank, that guy once asked me how I could manage to write while working like 16 hours a day for him. And I said, well, I go home after this and then I write for 2 hours every day. And that's what happened. And he said, well, Steve, that's the difference between you and me, because you're a professional and I'm an artist. And 6 years later, that guy is still running a wine store. So, there's things that are beneficial to romanticize about creative works. And then there's things where it's beneficial to be like, okay, like I did all the wild, like, I took ayahuasca and I came up with a story, Grant Morrison style. But at the end of the day, then I have to sit down and write it. And I think that because I've always been able to sort of just do that, it's why I've had success in a lot of these areas. Why I can do a lot of stuff, because the big, like, sitting and having block and all those things, that happens when you're outlining and when you're planning the book. But once I decide to start delivering it, it's there. And I think that's why you've seen a lot of work from me.
You're getting compliments in the chat.
Oh, well, thank you. I love Riley. Riley is still one of my favorite collaborators. If you haven't read Martian Manhunter, if you haven't read Batman in the Shadow and you like Martian Manhunter, that's the book we did before that. And we're very proud of that too.
Underrated artist. I don't think he gets the credit he deserves. There's a couple artists where I think they kind of work in the shadows. Like Lee Weeks is another guy I don't think gets anywhere near the run he deserves.
Well, it's hard. Lee is also great. I love Riley. I'd work with him as many times as I'm allowed or able to. But at the same time, yeah, I think Riley is underrated. I think he's a trendsetter and innovator. But the issue is, like, for some readership, just like anything else, when you really are innovating, sometimes folks don't have a frame of reference or context for it, And so I think, in 10 years, people will look back at what Riley did when everybody's doing it, and they'll say, oh, like, this is where it came from. But on some level, I think people aren't trained to identify what is next or what's coming or what's new and smart about comic storytelling. So much as they're used to recognizing the same 4 tricks that people use to show you that it's serious comics.
Well, I remember early on, people shit on Tim Sale's art constantly. How like his characters look like thumbs.
I mean, people shit on Frank Quitely, and he's the greatest living comic artist. So,
agree.
Like, but you know what? If Frank showed up and did a 9-panel grid for 20 issues, like, people would be like, oh, now he's a serious artist. So, it's challenging sometimes to be on the cutting edge, and this is not just about Riley. I think you're right, but a lot of folks. I mean, Trad Moore is another example. We didn't even.
Oh my God! Yeah.
We wouldn't even have to just talk about people that I've collaborated with, but like, when it is new and different, folks sometimes don't know how to react. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, they're used to the familiar. But if you go back again, like, to me, Quitely is the greatest living artist, and he will be until he dies, and hopefully he'll never die. So But if you go back to when he was on New X-Men, people were fucking furious about it.
No one draws a chin like him.
No, that one draws a chin or gravity-defying clothes like this.
Yes.
But people at the time were like, "What is it? This isn't what X-Men looks like," and so on and so forth. And
it was the Grant Morrison of it, where he's like, "No, I'm going to bring my dudes on this book, and you're going to eventually love it. Not now, but eventually."
Well, and the thing too is that I understand why folks are sometimes slow to see what's new and different as genius, because I was one of those people, by the way. Like, I loved Grant and Howard Porter on JLA, and I didn't know Clark's work at the time. So when I saw being like younger and stupid, I was like, oh, surely they Grant is going to go and X-Men's going to look like Justice League, and it looked nothing like it. And it took me a while to be like, oh wait, this is actually incredible. But at first, yeah, I was one of those people like, well, where's the slick Howard Porter shit? Why aren't you putting Ian Churchill? Why are you putting Ian Churchill with Casey and not Morrison and so forth? Ironically, Casey has gone on to become also one of my mentors and friends. But at the time, I was just like, this motherfucker. Like, why? So, but yeah, it's always interesting to see what clicks with people. But I think folks like, not just Riley's, I said, Tread Moore, Arlie, I could go on. James Stokoe, Marley Zarconi, yes, they are married. That's why they popped into my head together. But they're both incredible. And I think the time will come when folks see that. I mean, Darrington is having his day because of Batman Universe, but he's been genius for a while, a long time. He was genius on New Patrol.
I mean, I was one of those jackasses. I shit on Kirby when I was younger. He's like, Liefeld, McFarlane, the Image guys, that's where it's at.
Yeah.
And then the more you dig in, you're like, no, like everybody, like what Kirby did back then and how many books he was, juggling. It's insane. And then Art Adams, insane. I think, had more influence on any artist modern just because of his loose style that he used back then.
Well, and I think a lot of times, too, is that those artists get trapped by the expectations of their readership. I think Jim Lee is an incredible artist. You've seen when he does painting, when he does watercolor, when he does ink wash. People want 1992. And so on some level, I think you can reach a level of notoriety where it becomes a little bit of a cage too. Like, my favorite thing that he's ever done is his Deathflow stuff.
Yes,
and that stuff is gorgeous.
And that was him imitating Frank.
A
little bit,
without the craziness that would come in Frank's life.
Oh my god!
But yes, so it is interesting. But anyway, that's my long spiel about artists who I think are way ahead of the curve. I was very excited to see Tread Moore get nominated for Silver Surfer Black this year. I think that he's been genius for a long, long time.
I'm not gonna lie, when I picked up Silver Surfer Black, I was like, I don't know what this is. And then the more I read it, I was like, oh no, this fits the story perfectly.
Go back and read his all-new Ghost Rider if you haven't. That shit is like transcendental. No one draws at like speed and motion like Trad. For the longest time, I said that he should be the one to draw Flash Year One when Williamson was doing it. And Howard did an incredible job, so I've never besmirched the name of Howard Porter. But yeah, I would love to see anyone who moves fast and has that high energy like Trad does incredible work with those characters.
So now that we've talked about subjection of art, let's get on to Heroes in Crisis. I mean, not Heroes in Crisis. Commanders in Crisis. Jesus, I got.
What's that other book you mentioned? I've never heard of it.
It's a different crisis.
Yes. Well, Commanders in Crisis. Where did the idea come from for this book?
A lot of places. A lot of it is, the powers and the backstories of the characters are often things that I wasn't allowed to do at the big two for one reason or another. Which again is not really like, me being shady. Like, the obligations are totally different when you're working on an 80-year-old billion-dollar IP than when you're working on something that you made yourself. So the freedom was very exciting, and I wanted to lean into that. But also, one of the biggest challenges actually that I had at DC, when you find out anytime you're not writing the premier super team, is the question of why are these people together? And it's something that. What's something that they face with the Titans all the time? Not the Teen Titans, because obviously they're the teen heroes. But why are these people who were friends when they were in their teenage years still together? And they've been trying to answer that for 30 years. And the interesting thing to me, now that we've seen the reveal in issue 1, is that, like, without endorsing or decrying it, I'm fascinated by the fact that it seems that almost everyone, with one notable exception that is germane to today, after they leave the presidency, like, sort of becomes peers and friends, even if you wouldn't expect it. Michelle Obama is famous for being friends with W at these events.
Yes.
It's an endorsement of his policies, but what I think is fascinating is you do this job, and really there's like 8 people in the world that know one way or another what you just went through for 4 to 8 years. And I think that, like, bonds are formed there that are really fascinating to me and unexpected. So with the Commanders in Crisis, what I wanted to do is sort of do that in the superhero stories. So now you have folks that had not only have that shared experience, but they're also the last survivors of the multiverse. And they're really the only people that know what each other's lost, and what they've gone through. So the idea really came from giving them the strong core bond, not necessarily the same as we see in the real world, although we'll be exploring that, it's a complicated job where you have to make impossible, shitty decisions. But it was a chance to sort of dig into that idea that, well, these people are together because really they're the only people that understand each other. They're basically fighting for something that no one else can really comprehend. And that's what brings them together. And once we knew that, the rest of the story just sort of fleshed out from there.
There's a level with empathy there, like, not only like they're there because they need to be, but like other characters are there for other characters. So that's really, like you mentioned with George W. and Michelle Obama, whatever friendship that they have together, there's a level of empathy whether they like each other or not.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why I'm always sort of interested. I try to say the precise things about it, because I don't necessarily think that you leave the office and suddenly Michelle thinks George did a great job.
Yeah,
that's pretty obvious that that's not the case. However, again, like who else can you talk to about these things, about even about transitioning into civilian life, quote unquote again. So that's always really fascinated me. And of course, the current piece of shit will never be in that club, and then also.
I don't think they'll let him in. I honestly don't.
No, there's a poetic justice to the fact that he quite literally became one of the most powerful people in the world, and he still can't sit at the cool kids table. You got to be a classless evulsion of a human being.
And Richard Nixon was someone who everybody decried, but even he acted classier than this guy. Please, everybody, I hope you went out and voted today. Seriously, you really should vote. You should have voted. And I saw people going, "Oh, well, I don't really want to vote. Nothing will change." Well, guess what?
That definitely, that statement comes from a point of privilege.
Yes.
For sure, there may be a lot of things that
and
won't change
ignorance.
for them. Yeah, but
and it comes from privilege and ignorance. I've been I've been following this, obviously the elections today here, but I'm also following the elections down in Puerto Rico. So it's inundated from both. So my newsfeed is my friends from Puerto Rico, some of them complaining and not doing anything about it, and then the same things here. And I read a lot of that if nothing's gonna change, I won't do anything, and it's so disappointing. Disappointing.
He'll remain nameless because I'm going to go in on him. But I mean, I lost it on a friend for that reason, and it is there's an interesting perspective, I shouldn't say it. I mean, interesting is a generous word, but he said, "Oh, well, I have asthma and I live in a red state. I'm not going to say who it was. And, they're making it hard to vote. So I'm just not going to vote because I don't want to die." And I was like, you realize you're telling me, your queer friend that, you're, afraid of getting sick is more important than me potentially getting rounded up. And he was like, "Well, man, if they come for you, I'll be out there in the streets. If they start rounding," I'm like, "No, you fucking won't. You can't even go put a piece of paper in a box." So and that's fine, but don't come here acting like you're fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger in this shit or whatever. I don't even care if you're a coward, but don't expect a fucking hand job for it.
Yeah.
But I mean, the stuff they're talking about is almost what was going on with what Alan Moore was writing about in V for Vendetta about, how Thatcher was gonna, have these camps to try and reform people. Like
V for Vendetta is quaint. You know why? Because that book posits that if the cops or the military killed a kid, people would care.
True.
And you know, I distinctly remember in the Bush era coming back actually from a vacation in Puerto Rico. And we went and saw V for Vendetta, and I was like at the time, like, yeah, like that. The movie adaptation, at least, it's been a while since I read the book, hinges on like that one little girl dresses up and gets shot by the military. Like that shit happens every week now.
Yeah.
So like it's quaint that they thought that would be the tipping point. But regardless, that's a long soliloquy about, you know, why Commanders in Crisis, I suppose, and why empathy fucking matters, because
very much
that sums up to me this whole past 4 years. The most damning article I ever read is not even one that's necessarily about a crime, but it was just this op-ed that, and the title I will remember it for the rest of my life was just, and it just said, I don't know how to explain to other people that they should care about other people. And I was like, I mean, that to this day it affects me because, yeah, how do you, you know? And that's kind of where we're at. So
I was having this conversation earlier today with a friend, and we were asking the same questions. How do you explain to someone why voting for this person affects me directly so much, and why you doing that just shows that you don't care about me or where I'm at? And it's like trying to scream to a wall.
I feel like I've had a lot of time to think about this, and I think what it is, and that that quote, and I'm probably paraphrasing it, misquoting it, whatever, but everyone in their own head is the hero, right? So I think that ultimately, you know, whether people vote blue or red, they think in their own brain they're doing the right thing. And that's kind of weird to me. Like, what type of mental gymnastics do you have to do to vote for someone who proudly makes fun of people with stutters, who proudly makes fun of disabled people?
He's a dog whistle for racists.
It's 100%, like at this point, it's not even a dog whistle. It's calling Lassie by the name and, you know, stand down. And as someone who, because I'm in Portland, and there's a lot of stuff. I feel like we've kind of become like a big red X on the map on like where things are going to go down. And, you know, it's like, luckily I live in a very blue state, in a very blue community, if you'd call it that. But there's this increasing threat of violence on so many different levels. And that's kind of like a weird space that I'm inhabiting. But I go back to, I really think that everyone thinks that they're doing the right thing. Anyone who would vote for someone or vote again for someone like that thinks that they're doing the right thing, and thinks that they're, oh, well, you know, this dude, 45, he's, you know, done so much more for Black people than anyone else, except maybe Abraham Lincoln. And, you know, gay people love him. And we've got, oh, I can't even think of her name. Kylie Jenner, the Jenner's mom. I can't think of her name.
Kris Jenner.
What was that?
Kris Jenner.
Kris Jenner. Oh, Caitlyn Jenner.
Caitlyn.
So
formerly
Jenner,
Bruce.
like, we don't want a dead name here, but Caitlyn Jenner, even though she's a trashy person, is like, you know, well, at least 4 years ago, was like, Trump's great. And so I think everyone thinks that they're the hero in their own story.
Now that you mentioned the Portland of it, so were the Portland riots going on when you wrote Portland into issue 2 that we saw the preview?
Like, I'll be quite honest, that was complete happenstance. And I would gladly ascribe, you know, a plan to myself when there is one. But Portland's there because one of my best friends is David F. Walker, who lives in Portland.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, then all that happened, and it became as if I was prescient. But, you know, I'll tell you what's prescient and what's not. And that was there because I wanted to go somewhere, and David and I are very good friends. So,
I mean, I'd heard tales of their, you know, police force already being kind of well-funded and kind of aggressive even before that started.
Yeah. Portland's like a spicy city with everything going on, but it's a beautiful city. Like,
It was one of the last places I visited before the pandemic, actually, because I was at Rose City.
Oh.
And I liked it. Yeah, I would gladly come back. I got to, but it was, yeah, I mean, honestly, it was in that book because of my experiences there. And then everything happened. And it was just like, oh my God. And now David is doing those anarchist jurisdiction exploitation movie posters that
I love it. Every time he posts, like, because he's got 2 different accounts. So he'll like post it on like each one. I love them.
And you go and like all of them.
Yeah.
David doesn't have a fuck left, and I love him for it.
There's a bunch of guys like that I noticed when this started. They were just like, you know what? Fuck it. I don't care about my readership. I don't care about my fans. Rick Remender straight up told everybody to fuck off, basically.
Tom King today posting his like a t-shirt, and people in the comments still like, you just lost a fan. Do you feel like you've experienced that, Steve? This like backlash against your political beliefs?
Thank you.
I'll be honest, not really. I mean, I maybe I'm going about it differently. I don't have a great answer for that, you know, to be honest, because I don't get I mean, other than the fact that Rick and Tom both have significantly larger followings than me. If I had 200,000 followers like Tom, there would probably be more people disagreeing. So I don't know. I mean, I'm relatively outspoken. But at the same time, I do curate I mean, you know, like anyone, like I curate myself differently on social media than in real life, because you can't really hear my voice or my inflection when you say things on Instagram or on Twitter. So I don't know. And, you know, I don't like, and to be frank, without like taking random pot shots, like when I say something, even though my carnal and like passion reaction might be to be really vulgar about something, I tend to not sort of go to that level. So, and there is, I don't know, like it's pretty clear I'm no fan of the president. It's pretty clear on a lot of things, but you know, Rick told people to drink a can of urine or something like that.
Yes, basically.
And like, that's good for a headline, but he's really just putting himself over there, you know, like, and so, I mean, my opinions are clear. And maybe because I'm from Central New York and used to dealing with a lot of loudmouth assholes, like it's just much easier for me to not respond.
I'm from Long Island originally.
Yeah, I don't really have a good answer to that. Like, I don't really engage people. If people want to come into my mentions and just be like, you know, get woke, go broke, whatever, like fucking, they can say whatever they want. Like, but all they want is to also have you respond and just be like, oh no, well, people tell me to fuck off since I was like 10 years old. You know, like, so I don't know. I've been lucky in that, I suppose. But you know, it's such a web of. I mean, you know, Tom does that, but Tom does a lot of things, and he's also one of my good friends in comics. But if there's a variety of things that put fan and readership anger on him, whether it's justified or not. So I never know. I never know what the alchemy is. But I really haven't, you know, knock on wood, it'll probably happen right now.
Yeah.
I've never really had, like, there's always one or two people, but it really is fascinating to me what does and does, what sort of deadens the conversation and or an argument and keeps it going. It happened to me, you know, when I was standing up for Chelsea Kane, and then when I wasn't standing up for Chelsea Kane, which ended up being a TERF. But, you know, like I had people, oh, you know, you're such a cuck and feminism is cancer and all these things. And I would just say no. And
no.
Like,
Chelsea Kane, the only thing I really had a problem with, like early on, was her taking people's Twitter comments and incorporating them in the book. I thought that was a little
childish.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say anything else about that. Like, but we should be holding ourselves to a higher standard. And that's really what it is, you know, like there's the impetus for us. I don't know. I think some folks have never had, I mean, I worked jobs where I had to deal with a lot of idiots for a long time, for like 15 years before comics. And I think if you've never done anything else, you sort of like don't realize that, like, maybe just don't say everything, and don't take everything so personally. Like, I could never, trust me, it's like my fantasy to put some of my hate mentions in one of my comics, but it's just not what you should be doing. And also, like, if it's funny, I personally don't get angry. The only thing that angers me is the uncanny valley. Like, if you say that I suck, that's annoying because I can't really do anything with that. But like, if you're like at celebrity mean tweet level of bullshit, then how can I even be angry? Really, Louis Dreyfus isn't angry. I can't be angry.
I think Jennifer and I, the worst comment we got is that someone said we're so woke that we lost half our hair because of it. Because we shave our heads. It's one of the dumbest comments, but like,
yeah.
like you went out of your way in your day to write that.
Like, thank you for the comment. Thank you for watching, man. Like, whatever. Thank you for noticing.
Also, just I really learned when to not engage, and I think that's been beneficial, and it can be challenging.
I have to learn that.
And folks. And also when you're someone like, it was an early thing for me to learn to sort of realize the power dynamic and when you have the followers I have or the followers that Tom has, like, again, if someone walked up to me in the street, it was like, hey, Orlando, fuck off. Like, I have no problem telling them, what I thought about that. But it's different because when I say that in a public space, Twitter feels private, but it's clearly public. So then, 20,000 people are going after that person. It's just not worth it. And it has ramifications. I mean, listen, the biggest thing for me is I've just learned when to pick my battles. I mean, I've only ever identified as bisexual in comics, and I'm called the openly gay writer of something at least 4 times a week. And, it's a can of worms because inevitably someone will take me saying that I'm not gay out of context, that I don't like gay people or something. And that's clearly not the case at all. I'm dating one. But it doesn't mean that I shouldn't be able to stand up for my own identity. But it's just about like knowing, again, like when to step out and when to just sort of realize you might be doing more damage, than good by stepping into those conversations.
Go ahead.
I think that's really, really important. Just knowing when not to waste your time and when not to waste your energy and engage in battles that are not going to go anywhere. I'm learning that. I'm one that someone says something and I immediately go like immediately start screaming. And make sure that that I'm angry at you for saying that stupid dumb shit. But at the end of the day, I've noticed that it's only pissing me off, and
you're right, because that's what they want. Like, they're not, again, like, it just, like, I mean, there are some fucking pieces of shit that, hopefully I, don't have to deal with in person, but it's easier and better for my own life to just avoid them and mute them and things on social media. For my own toxicity.
Yep. Just for your own well-being, it's better to just, what? I am not going to engage with you.
I mean, dudes, there are dudes, prominent figures in certain, shall we say, gated comics communities that have talked to me and my now ex and shit on Facebook and stuff, and like I could go into them, but like it's like that's what cannot obviously be done. Like, I'm never going to fucking interact with that piece of shit again. But all they want is for you to be like, oh, how could you say such a, like, that's all they want.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know.
I'm learning slowly. If it doesn't make you happy and it doesn't make you money, like, don't engage.
It's not worth it.
Yeah.
A lot of things I do don't make me money, but
I was gonna say that. I was gonna say, I don't know, man, because I've done a lot of shit that's not making me money.
That makes me happy. Constantly live tweeting and trolling WWE Raw does not make me money. If only it could. But.
Maybe you could get like some type of sponsorship or.
God, they don't want me explaining why their storytelling is bad.
That's bad for years. It's been bad for years. There's no personalities anymore, but I don't want to get into that right now.
Right? Yeah.
So back to Commanders in Crisis. The one thing Jen and I, after reading the PDF, like 100% afterward, when you sent out to everybody who you wanted to talk about it beforehand, which thank you very much. Like, as a small channel, I really appreciate that.
Of course.
Representation in this book, like conscious, subconscious, or you just knew you wanted to do it. This is the book I hear everybody crying that they want. And my thing when I did the review is, if you wanted representation, spend your money on this. Like, speak with your wallet, seriously, because I hear everybody crying about it, and then the book comes out, and they're like, I bought issue 1, didn't support it after that. It's like, well, you got what you wanted. Like,
I mean, I'm never going to argue with you saying that people should buy my books. And to an extent, that's true. You know, like I would still be writing Midnighter and Midnighter Apollo now if the second volume didn't launch to cancellation numbers. It's not that simple, you know, but at a base level, that's still what publishers respond to, especially with an Image book, because that's directly, I mean, you are essentially directly supporting the creators of that book. Image takes a small distribution and printing fee, but otherwise all of the profit from those books goes right back to the creators. That's why Image is special and the best place to do creator-owned work. But yeah, also like that's a factor, and it breaks my heart in many cases because, you know, folks will say like, oh, when are you going to go back to Midnighter? It gets asked me a lot, but like, to be quite frank, like DC probably would not put me on Midnighter again because they consider me on Midnighter to be a sales failure.
By the way, Jennifer and I loved Midnighter.
I mean, I love it too. So it's not about
you made him enjoy who he was, which he was always like a little too grim, and like he kind of enjoyed who he was. And you introduced the Grayson thirst, which our friend Sid very much enjoyed.
Well, thank you. Although that was Celia and King did it. I mean, they did write the ass scene, which I was like, oh, I wish I could. At first, but no, like, and that's what's tough because, you know, we do, those sales numbers do matter, but also like I'm always, it's always important for me to say like, that does not put the blame on readers, because the onus is not on. I mean, folks should be able to support a book however they want, in whatever fashion they want. So when I say it's not that simple, that's kind of what I mean, because yeah, sales matter, but also like oftentimes big companies, I'm the own marketing person for Commanders and Crisis, so if that shits the bed, that's on me. But for bigger companies, you know, they act like it's Field of Dreams, right? Like if you build it, they will come, but they still have to come to a place that they probably won't necessarily feel comfortable in and come to it on the terms of the publisher, and that's fucked up. So, you know, like we need to change metrics for success. We need to change the way they market books. I mean, diversity.
Definitely, 100%.
Diversity is important on the page, but diversity is important behind the page, not just in a story sense, but a business sense as well. You need you need folks to know how to speak to these communities, so that you can actually raise awareness that these things exist before it's too late. So sales matter, but also a holistic overhaul matter, I guess is what I'm saying.
So like at Image, Jen and I always talk about the Cat and Salazar PR machine that goes on, where certain books, like they get behind, like Mercy was one of them, where Philadelphia by Rodney Barnes kind of fell through the cracks with the marketing, and it's Mercy a damn great book.
And Mercy got the spotlight, and I know that it hit for a lot of people, but it didn't necessarily land for me. Mm-hmm. I want to talk about diversity really quick, because there is, I think that there are a lot of comics readers who are saying like, yes, 100%, we want diversity, like you said, behind as well as on the page. There is also, I would say, a very loud vocal minority who calls it forced diversity. Anytime they see any diversity whatsoever, they say that's forced diversity. That's not what we want. So considering how much, I would say, diversity is in your stories, who's forcing you to do this?
Well, I mean,
to the crowd who says, like, you know, whenever they see anyone of color on the screen, anyone of color behind, you know, anyone who is queer, they say it's forced diversity. Like, is someone forcing you to do this?
Well, no, I mean that's it. Well, at least at a company like Image, no one forces you to do anything. It's a myth. At this, you know, and obviously the reality with folks who think that. I mean, and I should say as well, like, I'm not obligated to anyone's money or attention, so they're wrong. But if they want to think that, they have every right to think that. Like, I'm not. Whatever, you know, it's wrong for me to think that because in any scenario someone is obligated to buy my books. or like them. But that reasoning is just not true. You will see, I can't really speak to the big two. I know I've been there. And it's hard to parse because oftentimes corporate folks do talk about these things in corporate speak, which seems to commodify everything. But at the same time, like, I've never been forced to do anything. And as you pointed out, the reality is that any type of emergence of marginalized folks is often looked at as forced, when in the reality is, like, our obligation is to depict the world as it is. And the world as it is diverse. So, I mean,
100%.
If folks are uncomfortable with that, I, in some ways, am piteous of that. Like, that's too bad. But it is also the world, and this is my book. For better, my obligation is to tell the story we want to tell, and a creator-owned book with image. Folks aren't obligated to buy it. That's too bad. If they're, like, I don't know, uncomfortable with recognizing that things have changed since, I don't know, 1700. But there's no one's forcing, and especially the case. I mean, look at what's going on. I mean, this is a book about right now, and I'm spoiling it when it happens, I guess. But it's important, though. There's a moment in Commanders in Crisis where the team eventually says, why did it take the multiverse for anyone who looks like us to achieve any level of power? And I had said that on Twitter because people say, well, why the presidents? Well, because it's the fact that, like, it took going out to alternate realities to find places where the entrenched power structure was willing to allow brown people, black people, queer people, people with different genders and religions, anyone else to the table. So, I mean, it's very pointed why we did this. And the very fact that they come from outside reality is the statement in many ways. And the statement is somewhat grim, but again, like, as we just discussed, like, some folks really struggle with the fact that the way that they see the world is not the only way that the world could be, or even that their circle, which is very real to them, isn't everyone's circle. My father famously told me about 4 years ago that racism was over because when he went to the South in the 70s, he didn't see people getting lynched. And that sounds like a joke, but it is challenging for some folks to realize that their subjective reality is not the norm, and it's not objective reality. If you live in a small town for some, which there's nothing wrong with that, and you've never met a queer person, that doesn't mean they don't exist. Like, there's object permanence when it comes to marginalized folks. Like, they're out there whether you see them or not. So that's the world, and it bums me out when folks can't see that. But yeah, obviously no one is forcing me to do things. And it's what I think is right, because really, again, especially in my own work, I know that when I was younger and I saw queer characters or I saw Jewish characters based on my own experience, it was important for me to see that and know that I could be the lead and that I could be, the hero. And that it's why it's perhaps appropriate that I broke on Midnighter, because that was a big character for me. When I was coming up in the 90s, the representation we had in, like, TV and media, it wasn't wrong, but it didn't fit how I my personality. And so I had a lot of conflict. Like, this must be the way I have to act. Like, if I'm a queer person, I must act like the two queer characters I see on TV. Otherwise, I'm doing something wrong. Well, no, that's certainly not the case. There's no right or wrong way to be anything.
I remember the shock when they outed Midnighter and Apollo. Like, everybody was like, wait, what? And perfect.
Well, and now I think the pendulum in that specific topic has swung the opposite way, where we're so obsessed with characters that don't, quote unquote, do anything too gay, and they're, like, hyper masculine. And so we got to swing it back the other way and point out that they're, equally, there's nothing wrong with any, there is no right or wrong behavior. I shouldn't even say anything wrong, because there is no right or wrong. There's no one way to be queer. I mean, and that's an evolution I had myself. Like, I try to say it all the time. Because a lot of people probably come in these shows and say that they've been right about everything for their entire life. And I have not been, like, I was from Central New York. I didn't personally relate to more outgoing or loud sort of depictions of queer folks, or like gender challenging depictions of queer folks. And yeah, I mean, me at age 18 was an asshole about that shit, but me at age 35 knows how fucking stupid I was about that. And you know, that's a process you go through. And you know, that's why this representation matters. You know, I learned that it was okay to be a somewhat more quote unquote straight acting queer person from Midnighter. And then I learned from all these other things that there's, you know, it was just my own internal prejudices saying there's anything wrong with the other shit and I need to get on my own way. But without those examples and without those personal interactions, some folks never go on that journey and they just stay assholes. So, you know, we sort of have to try to avoid that. That's why I think it's important.
You and Cinegrace both put out one of the most interesting books of last month. Cinegrace is getting it together. Like, unfortunately, probably led a lot of people to Urban Dictionary to look up a term in it.
Well, when Kill a Man comes out, I say "bussy" in it, which is a thing that you know might be a first for comics. Sorry,
because when we're reviewing getting it together, Jennifer's like, I'm not going to go into what this is, but
what sounding is, but you know, hey, if you're adventurous.
But again, that was another book.
You know, I think I learned that from that book too. I guess I'm betraying myself as being artisanal vanilla, but I think I learned that from the review copy that they sent me.
It was a great book. Like, I was not expecting to like it, and I started reading it. I was like, this is fucking great. Like, and I'm not a huge Cinegrace fan, but like, for some reason it hit me in like a part that like wanted that story.
Well, there's no sounding in Come Out as a Crisis, so
darn it.
I'm about to go write the fan fiction right now. Sorry.
I just do a page with ass eating though, because I think it's important to normalize that. I can't put that on fucking whatever her name is, Allison Williams in Girls. But we need new representation. We need more butt eating representation. So keep a lookout. Man is a Crisis 5. I just improved the layouts today, and obviously, you know, like that's just a small nuance to the story. But I'm here to provide that content.
Thank you.
Gambit in particular was a huge fan of your Justice League of America and you bringing Lobo, the old school Lobo, back in that story.
Yes. I am a big fan. I also, my introduction to Midnighter, well, not my introduction, I know who the character was, but it was your Midnighter the first time I read anything Midnighter.
Oh, awesome.
At all. Yeah. So it was a pretty cool. I wanted to add that going to Commanders in Crisis, before I talk a little bit about the other stuff, is how much fun do you have writing these characters? For me, it feels like it was it feels like when I was prepping, I used to play a lot of RPG at some point in my life, and there's this game called Mutants and Masterminds, and this book reminds me a lot of when I sit down and try to write story ideas for the other players before we sat down on a weekend and spent countless hours.
I mean, it's a lot of fun, and it's freeing after like 5 years of being on contract. If I have an idea, I can just put it in. You're going to get a lot of ideas, and a lot of them are going to be bizarre. Like, I mean, the closest thing I got to something like that is when I was on Milk Wars with Gerard, and you know, we had Flex Mentallo give everyone an orgasm, and then they put
that was a weird story.
Yes, and there'll be stuff like that at Commanders Crisis, but it's like 15 to 20% more superhero than that. But look, I mean, I have for better or worse, you're kind of getting like very fresh, not ripped from the headlines, but ripped from my brain, sort of flash superhero fiction outside of the macro plot. And that's exciting to me. You know, like if I have an idea, it can go into the next issue, especially with the way that we've laid it out. And it's part social commentary, and it's part my love of bizarre, like Silver Age comics. And I'm really hoping that people go on that journey with me, because it's going to be strange. Like, it's not going to be the super serious, like post 80s work that we've gotten for a long time. There's definitely like what comes up that I was most proudest of, that I almost lost friendships over. There's a crime, like a Law and Order screenwriting algorithm that comes to life in one issue and starts acting out. Because I was watching the SVU recent season, it's like they just Mad Lib this shit at this point, like. And I was like, oh well, what if that were the case? Like, and so these screenwriters they want to sort of job out, so they have this thing that's going to write the scripts for them, but then it comes to life and starts enacting the plots in the real world, and that's an issue, and it's called the Fate algorithm. I was building up. I lost. Someone blocked me on one of my chats for a week ago. But I just like that when I have an idea, I can go in and it can fit into the structure. And yeah, I mean, we're just building out. Like, there's so much more. I mean, our Trinity is very exciting. And you were talking about like people behind the scenes as well. Like, when we have an issue that introduces, for example, like American Dreamer, who's our Captain America type. I'm co-writing that issue with one of my friends who is, a Black non-binary person. We're using the series not just to get these new ideas out there, but also to sort of give some other folks a foothold in the work, both in the writing and also in like covers and things like that. We featured a lot of artists that haven't been doing comics work before, and all that stuff is really exciting to me. Like, comics should be new, and you have to have enough of that sort of soul food, comfort food, I should say, that they know that folks stick around. But we want to be giving you folks new. We want to be giving you folks something that's surprising as often as possible. So yeah, it's knowing what's coming. It's very fun, and knowing what I have laid out but haven't written yet, it's going to be even wilder. So I'm excited.
How many, if you don't mind me asking, about how many issues do you anticipate it being, or is it going to be like, is it going to be like Game of Thrones, where it's like, okay, it's going to be 3 books, now it's 7, and now it's like 30 years later?
Well, I mean, unlike Game of Thrones, I'll finish it. But,
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Did you hate the last season?
Management Crisis. I mean, it's a 12-issue maxi, and then my thought, what comes after will really depend on how the series goes. I mean, all of my superhero stuff that's not Marvel or DC is going to live in this world now, but how that stuff gets branded, whether it's a direct sequel or their new launches, will really depend on where we end with issue 12. But my thought is to do with those mains is to do books set in the world where each of them is a play on, like this one, like event storytelling. So you can have these spin-offs that feature characters, but then we'll come back and it'll be a different type of sort of event storytelling. The next one, I kind of want to do it like Milk Wars, because I love putting that together which would mean a bookend issue and then solo character focused things that happen in between, because folks need to get to know these people more, especially because I can't stop myself and keep building. Even fun log lines have to become characters. Although I was really crushed. I was talking to my therapist last week and I told her I was excited for this character, Uncle Samhain, and turns out she's married to like a Gallic sorcerer, and she informed me that that's pronounced Samhain.
I just learned that the other day too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible. I need the Uncle Sam one, and I can't have it now.
I don't know anywhere to make that satanic with
that's
Well, they already did American Scream at DC, so I needed something else.
I gotta say, like, I really like David Tinto's art on your book. Like, it moves the story along well, which, as I've gotten older, I've appreciated the way that an artist can kind of move the story. Not so much an illustrator, but more of a storyteller.
Yeah.
He's great as well, because I think no matter how weird I get, folks will still have him sort of like, this sounds terrible, but like as a superhero comic baby blanket, like it still looks like a superhero comic. So you're never, like, no matter what I do, I mean, we can go inside someone's esophagus, which happens in an issue, and it's still going to feel like you sort of know. I mean, we went inside an iguana birth canal on Martian Manhunter, so I do have standards to upkeep. But no, Davide has been an incredible asset for the reasons you say. Like, I can challenge him every issue. He just keeps getting better, and he's always going to make sure that no matter how strange and provocative the scripts get, he's delivering them in a way where you guys are getting everything you need, and it's really still palatable, which is important. You know, like if you don't like the taste or you don't like the sound, you're not going to actually be hearing what we're delivering. So there wouldn't be a book without what Tinto's doing.
Also going back to Justice League for a minute, the way you wrote Killer Frost, for the first time in my life, I cared about her.
Well, thank you.
That series.
Like she was such a strong character, and then the romance with Adam, or will they, won't they kind of relationship, I was here for it, and I didn't know I wanted it.
I came to really like Ryan a lot, and Killer Frost was surprised. They were both surprising to me. You know, there were no real mandates on the team other than Lobo, because they just wanted to, you know, reintroduce him and using some villain from Justice League versus Suicide Squad. But I think we really lucked out with what we had with Ryan and Caitlin. So I appreciate it. And like, honestly, like Ryan, on the topic of diversity, I tell a story all the time. You know, I already had issues. I was worried about doing Ryan Choi because he's already sort of a stereotype, and we couldn't change that, right? He was like the Asian kid obsessed with science, and I thought he was Korean because Choi is predominantly a Korean last name, but apparently, against all odds, he was Chinese. So already I was like, okay, like people are going to come at me for saying he's Chinese when it's mostly a Korean name, but that is what it is. Just like his thing with science. So I said, how can I subvert this? And okay, like he'll be into science, but he won't have the typical overbearing parents. Like they'll both be artists. And actually for him, going into science will be a form of rebellion. And the thing about that is that book was edited by Jess Chen, who, like Ryan, is from Hong Kong. And she actually got the script back. She was like, you know, I see what you're doing here, but you actually pushed it so far in the script that it would just never fucking happen. Like these Chinese and she was an asset on that book because without her, we never would have known. Like my instinct to worry about the stereotypical presentation would have been there. But without her editing, like none of us would have known that we had gone so far in the other direction that we had just sort of like, broken the suspension of disbelief, the cultural suspension of disbelief. So I think about that all the time because you can, without working with folks, either as readers or in editorial or in some formula, you can have the best intentions, but still completely miss the ball.
I know Gail Simone, she champions Ryan Choi a lot. She was always like, he was so fun to write. He was one of my favorite characters to write, and she still like brings him up quite a bit.
I mean, I loved him. I love sci-fi is my thing even more than superheroes. So, and the Atom to me can be a great sci-fi character. He can be a wild superhero character too, putting his foes in bottles, on a famous cover. But it should be a sci-fi book. I tried to build a microverse that was interesting in that way, and I was happy when Venditti went back to explore it actually in Hawkman.
Yes.
But I actually had a totally different idea for the microverse that didn't make it to print. So put a pin in that because that might end up being a book for me. But we'll see about that. But I love the shrinking power is really, really cool. The density power is really, really cool. I never got to use his bang stick, but it was on my mind.
Who was your favorite character to write in your time at DC, or well, you're still there, but like, is there a character above all that you enjoyed writing more than others?
Martian Manhunter, John Jones is my favorite DC character, so it's hard to not say that. And that book also like had no editorial interference. It was exactly the book that I wanted it to be. And we got to do so much that hadn't really been done before. I hate to use a Millerism and say it's never been done before, but when I say it, it's not just a copy of DC Who's Who. Diane Mead talking about bisexual erasure had never happened in the comic before. And that sort of playing off John's own internal, like his ability to pass as a human versus her ability to pass as straight. Like those things have never really been tackled before in a Big Two comic. They've been done before.
Yeah.
And so I was excited about that, but on a random topic, I really enjoyed working with Artemis, and I was sad we couldn't get her back before I had to leave Wonder Woman. I had a really good time with her in my first 5 issues I did.
Is there a character that you'd love to get a shot at, whether, Big Two wise, that you have a story just in your head for?
I mean, every Marvel character. But I mean, specifically Captain America is my favorite Marvel character that people will buy, and Captain Universe is my favorite Marvel character that people probably wouldn't ever buy. But I love I love basically all the captains. I also like Captain Midlands from Captain Britain and MI13. But I mean, I love the Shadow as well. I'd love to do a solo run on the Shadow. I mean, working with him and Batman together in Batman Shadow was really, really exciting for me because it's one of the few times you can really challenge Bruce. You know, people say we love to like get on, our horse and say that he's just a man. But what really is mortal or human about having an answer and a plan for everything? That's the opposite. So I loved that story because it really did make him mortal. Like it pissed him off to no end that he would never get to know about the Shadow because the Shadow was completely unknowable. And that ended up being so fun because that makes him real. Now he is a man. He still is incredibly adept and intuitive and intelligent, but he doesn't know everything, and he never will know everything. And I mean, what is to be mortal than that? You know, what more? So I loved him, and you know, I love the Justice Society, which was not really in canon the whole time I was there, but watch my Dark Multiverse one shot, and they're basically the stars. So I got my cookies in that case.
It's kind of weird. There's like the weird pushback of like Jeff Johns. I remember in an interview said that he hated Grant Morrison's Bat God, but yet I see him using somewhat of the Bat God in some of his stories, where the Batman who knows everything, you know. And it's interesting because Grant Morrison, like he wrote Batman as just almost omniscient. Like he had an answer for everything.
I mean, that has escalated in a way that I don't always find compelling. I'm trying to find the nicest way to say that. But yeah, I think it started honestly even in Grant's JLA.
Rock of Ages in particular, I remember like just over the top with Batman just like having an answer for everything where he was Desaad basically.
But you know, I like there's nothing wrong with not always, you know, being perfect. And so I like when he's scaled down and can be taken off guard. What the human thing is how we react to being taken off guard. So I don't know. I mean, and I'm not shading those depictions either because some folks like that. And we got 80 plus years of that. But for me, when his utility belt basically has everything in it and his utility brain has everything that his utility belt doesn't, you know, folks say that it's hard to write Superman because he's never really in danger, but realistically, is Bruce ever in danger if he has, you know, bad God repellent in his utility belt? No. So it's why I'm interested to see where James is going now that he has money and has to be like a ruffian. But yeah, I mean, I think that we love putting those abilities on him because it makes us feel like we're indestructible when we read him. But at the same time, like Batman should really be about how you overcome being mortal. I mean, in my never having written the main book except for 2 issues opinion, I suppose.
We have a hot button topic on the show. We talk about should we retire the pearls with the origin.
You had to bring that up, didn't you?
We have a guy who's written Batman.
So a little bit of my biggest like pet peeve in every single Batman story is that it always seems to be an origin story. Like we get a Joker movie and it's really jokes on us. We're the punchline. We get a Batman origin story. Like, do we need to see the pearls every single Batman story, and do we still need Batman origin story? Feel free to not even answer that. That's just a bone to pick with like. I feel like it's been overdone.
I think the pearls specifically are a weird thing to fetishize. So like that's my comment on that. Like, and it's never been more gross than when like in BVS you saw the dude put his fucking gun dick like
yeah,
and like break them with the fucking anyway, stupid. But I'm never someone to say that you have to retire anything, but you certainly can rest those because I don't know, it's that specific image. I just kind of don't necessarily. I understand that it affects Bruce, but it's not like you see an equally personal image to Thomas dying ever. So it kind of just makes me feel like they're especially want to drive.
Mommy complex.
Yeah, they want to drive home that a lady got shot, and that's a little weird. To me, the image is Bruce with the two parents, which is one of the year one covers, and that's moving to me. But the Pearls, I don't know. It's got to rest. It can rest. I shouldn't say gotta. It can rest. And if you do it, it's got to be something different. I guess that's what I would say. I don't necessarily think anything is ever off limits, but certain things is if you're going to keep doing it or do it for the first time, it better be a damn good idea. And which is not I have that idea, by the way. Sometimes I don't know what I would do. As for the origin, I don't think we need it in comics because it's right there.
Even the movies, I think once you've done it the first time, you don't need to.
I feel at this point, everybody knows the origin of Batman and everybody knows the origin of Spider-Man. We don't need to kill Uncle Ben again. We don't need to see Martha and Thomas dying again.
So those I don't know how to answer because at the same time, it's bad writing to assume audience knowledge of something. So I don't have a great answer.
That is true.
If you just, I guess the best example is if you just look at the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies, you don't know why he's doing anything based.
They allude to it slightly, but not much.
That's true. But based solely on what they give you in that movie, you don't really. You're right. There's a couple allusions, but you don't really know why he does a damn thing. But because you know who Spider-Man is, and you've seen his origin in the cartoons and all that.
That is true.
I don't have a great answer. I think you can shorthand it. You don't need anything more than, Dying Planet, Last Hope, Kindly Couple, whatever, from All-Star. I know I'm fucking that up. But for films, I think, and TV, I think it's complicated. You don't have to, it shouldn't be the whole story. But I do on some level think you have to acknowledge it because we're, as comic readers, are very apt to assume that everybody has read all the things we've read. And even that show, even that Spider-Man movie is going to be someone's first Spider-Man movie. So they should know why the characters are doing what they do. But yeah, it doesn't have to be the whole thing. The first movie shouldn't always, when you've rebooted 3 times, it doesn't have to always be just the origin. But I think you do have to give folks enough so that if you look at the screenplay in a vacuum, it's not like a broken screenplay or like a broken story. And characters have to have motivations. So it's complicated, but you definitely don't have to. People shouldn't, fans shouldn't be going to a first movie essentially waiting for the second one because they know what's going to happen in the first one somewhere. And that's the alchemy that we can't seem to always figure out.
Jen has been pushing Batman Year 18. She has a pitch.
Maybe normally I wouldn't pitch this to but I, talk about it on the show because we've got Batman Year 1, we've got Batman Year 100. I'm here to write Batman Year 18, Barely Legal, and just get wild with it. So I'm here for all the naughty, erotic Batman fiction, apparently. So that's what I'm here for.
I think you should set it in 1956 or whenever he'd been around for 18 years and just have he can. I mean, Batman already is basically a sad Don Draper fronting for the world.
Oh,
go back to the original. To me, I guess just because I love that. Who's the villain? The villain is going to be that weird crime. The crime family and things like that. It isn't always the wacky villain.
Super
so
villain.
Yeah.
I mean, I weirdly just want because he's so strange and he's never I just want a Mad Monk Batman movie where Batman actually gets to fight the supernatural instead of just the Joker for the 3rd time.
Yeah.
Or the Riddler, but it's 7.
I'd be down for Red Ring.
I like that.
I mean, but I'm also a huge mark for that shit. I watched the Batman TV movie where he fought Dracula. I watched
Yes, I watched it too.
It's never going to be better than Elijah Snow kicking Dracula's crotch out and Planetary.
Oh my god, that was the best. No matter what we think of Warren Ellis currently because of that news,
Well, when we read Planetary, we didn't know that.
No. That is crazy.
Your knowledge doesn't time travel, I guess, is my own personal opinion on that.
And if anything, John Cassidy's work on that book is fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
And that's what I have to like divorce myself a bit and say other people worked on this book. And like Planetary for me was like my Bible. I would go door to door and be like, "Here, have you read the good book?" I mean, it was a brilliant book. It was like a love story to comics, and like for the time, it was just so new and fresh.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of look. I'll be honest, like that. Obviously, it saddened me. He was a big influence on me, but it seems like the theme of this live stream is that you got to learn when to get out of your own way. And it took me like 10 minutes to realize that future work was just something we had to move on from, because because the reality is like, yeah, it's a bummer to realize one of your idols is shitty, but you know what is more of a bummer? Being one of the people affected by him. So like, it doesn't matter. It was so easy to move on from that. But the stuff from before, you can't go back in time, and you can't know that when those things came out. So I mean, I don't know how I would feel about. I don't know where I would stand on recommending those books to people now, but I certainly feel like there's no reason to feel bad if you enjoy them, knew what was going on, because you didn't know what was going on.
No, that's like Transmetropolitan. Like it stamped its point in time. Like again, that was like a fresh book that was just so new and so interesting. And again, like other people worked on that book, so it's hard to not recommend it to people. Like it's toxic. It's one of those weird things though of like divorcing yourself from the creator and the work. We kind of talked about that for a bit, and like trying to get your head around it of like, hey, the person who created this did some bad stuff, but I mean it's Frank Miller too. Like, good God.
The person listen, I loved Golden Child. That was some Bauhaus shit. That I could not even. I couldn't even comprehend what I was reading. But it was great art from Guerra, and it was the Joker wearing the fucking Melania jacket. Yeah, it's just fucking unreal. I at least like stuff to be full gonzo, if it's gonna be. And that book was. I have a hard time here. I don't have Strikes Again because the art in that infuriates me. Not in line work so much as the weird coloring mismatch, but there's artists I know that love that. So like that's just my personal opinion. And then I have Master Race because they gave me a comp of that, and I haven't read it yet. It's called Master Race. There you go.
It wasn't bad. When Strikes Again's the last thing you had to go against, it was like, this is great. But
like that whole era, I don't know. Like again, it's gonzo. I don't even know if I would dislike All Star Batman and Robin if I read it now, because it's it's violent camp.
I just remember Grant Morrison saying, if you read it from Dick Grayson's perspective, the story makes sense. If you don't, it's fucking batshit insane.
He makes still batshit insane. He makes Robin eat rats.
I just remember Holy Terror was the one where I was like, oh, Frank has really lost his shit. Like,
I didn't even try that one.
The thing I would say as well about Miller specifically, though, is that we can have our fun, but also like we're kind of dunking on someone who suffers with serious addiction issues.
Yes.
And so like it's always very complicated. And that's neither an excuse like for the things that have come out that were in poor taste. But it's something to consider,
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know, like these things are always incredibly complicated. And that's not like me speaking out of school. His struggles have been made pretty public.
Well, even his health turn, where like all of a sudden, like he came out in the public, and you're like, "Holy shit, what happened?"
Oh yeah, my first DC Comics party, he looked like a ghost. So
Yeah.
He looks like actually. He looked like. Do you know the Jedi Council guy who looks like a Q-tip?
Yes. Kiadi
Damn.
Mun. I weirdly know that name. Shit.
I don't know why you know that name.
He was just. I mean, I stand Yaddle from my prequel trilogy. They got rid of her too soon, but.
Yeah, because I just remember like during the Spirit, he looked healthy, and then all of a sudden I saw him again. I was like, "What happened?" Like I know the Spirit bombed, but wow.
The Spirit movie, like every 10 years, because that's only happened once. I'm like, maybe that wasn't what I thought it was, and I go back. Like, oh no,
it is.
This is quite not good.
Yeah, I try it too. I try it too. One day I was like, man, you know what? I'm gonna give it a chance. Let me watch this with different eyes now that I'm older, and I have some different, I think differently than 10 years ago. Now,
no, it's still bad. I mean, I will always go to the mat for both camp classics, the Shadow movie and the Phantom movie, both of which I wouldn't call. However, the Phantom does have Cary Hiroyuki Tagawa in it, who is one of my favorite character actors. And the Shadow has John Lone, another one in it. So, like,
the Shadow was pretty cool.
I just love how checked out Alec Baldwin is most of that movie. And like
Billy Zane in the Phantom isn't much better.
But some of his deliveries are so good. I'm a person who like loves the way words are said, which gets like, I'm forever quoting movies that people don't know are movie quotes because I just love random things in the way they're said. Like I can only say raisinets like Harvey Korman in Blazing Saddles when not giving the example like I just did now. And I just like, there's a scene in The Shadow where they shoot bullets and they're enemies and they both train in the same place. So the bullets, of course, smack directly into each other and pancake in the floor. And Dewan Khan sits down and he's like, "That's a nice suit. Where did you get it?" And Baldwin like forgets that you have to like breathe in between lines. And he's just like, "Brooks Brothers, 44th Street. You are a barbarian." And that's so fucking bad. And you just sound like fucking Maitland from Beetlejuice with this delivery.
Just want to get the lines out of it.
We got Dick Tracy around that time, like.
But the Dick Tracy movie is genius. I will actually unironically love that.
The Rocketeer was right around that era.
I haven't watched that recently, although it's the director of the Captain America First Avenger movie.
Joe Johnson.
I love the bizarre makeup. I love Al Pacino, Madonna, how to dance, which is cool. And I actually respect that they, people look at it like, oh, it's garish. But his rule in that movie was that he could only use colors that were used in the Dick Tracy comics when they were designing the movie. So in a weird way, like it does look just like a comic book. Yeah, I don't know. And also like Madonna's basically the question in that movie.
The marketing to that movie was insane. How much money they must have spent marketing that between like Madonna's "I'm Breathless" and like I forget what fast food restaurant they were tied with. It might have been Taco Bell. Like it was insane.
My second favorite, I think Susie and the Banshees song from Batman Returns is my Face to Face is my favorite movie theme from that era. But
I love Susie and the Banshees. That's not one of them though.
Also, Batman Returns. That movie is so horny, and like I can't. As a kid, to this day, I will watch it and like that same scene where Serena and Bruce are dancing, and he like presses up against her, and like, oh, she finds out that he's Batman because of the scar, and vice versa. And he goes, "No hard feelings," and she presses up against him and goes semi-hard, I'd say. And I was just like, this was for children. Like, what? Now you see why I'm like I am, because I saw it in theaters, I suppose.
Batman Year 18's already been written, and I didn't even know it.
Well, Batman and Robin, there was like that weird dick measuring contest between Clooney and the other kid was like, well, I got the Batman Forever card. It was like, what the fuck is going on? Like,
yeah.
I also love Batman. The only one that I don't think, again, if you learn anything about me on this live stream, Uncanny Valley, can't stand it. So Batman Robin going full camp, I enjoy. I mean, Uma Thurman is just a drag queen in that movie. And then I like Returns for being like a weird goth sex fantasy. But it's Just Forever, which has both tries to like have a real meditation on being Batman, but also Jim Carrey doing 90s Jim Carrey pelvic thrust. And I'm just like, what is this? Like, I'm angry about it even to this day. And also Nicole Kidman playing one of the worst psychiatrists in film.
Oh God, yeah. And then Bob Kane's wife is in it as the reporter.
She's in all that shit. She's Gossip Gertie.
But then again, like the last Nolan Batman, where like Christian Bale's like, I'm doing the voice.
Oh my God.
Nonstop.
I have an ongoing argument with Frank Barberi, the comic writer and now video game writer. He thinks that movie's a masterpiece, and it's been going for like 4 years. And he's probably watching this. It's probably going to happen again. And it's just so bizarre to me because he's like, you're just being a fanboy. This script is perfect, and I'm just like, okay. Right.
I mean, Tom Hardy's Bane, I grew to love. Like, listen to that voice; it's so angelic.
I mean, I love it now that they're dunking on it in the Harley Quinn cartoon, which my book.
Oh yes! Oh my God, that cartoon is so fucking funny.
I brought scones.
Where's the trigger? Like,
that is the best interpretation I've seen of that version of that character is in that show. It's fucking hilarious.
I'm at that weird.
Bane should be intimidating, and yet somehow we can't put that over the plate.
I'm at that weird point with like Joker and Harley, where the oversaturation it feels like a crutch when writing it.
Would people buy it? I mean, I don't mean to demystify these things, but the day that people stop buying books with Joker and Harley in them, they'll stop appearing in books. With corporate stuff, like and you get great stories out of them, but. I mean, look, Batman led Justice League of America because putting Batman in that book guaranteed it would have at least another 10 issues than it would otherwise.
Yeah.
Then if Vixen leading it like I originally planned. And I love Vixen and made her the co-leader. But
underused character, Vixen, except in the Justice League cartoon where like she was like a main.
I mean, when I look at Vixen, I see someone that went through everything that Bruce went through, but as a Black woman who started with nothing. So she's much more compelling. Like she came from Africa, lost both of her parents at different times, so she had to sort of like be halfway on the road and then lose her father, and then she basically became Beyonce/Oprah and was self-made. So like, how is that not compelling? It should be extremely compelling.
I also love Amanda Waller when she's written well. She's like an amazing character because she's just so arch, but like so underhanded with everything. Greg Rucka, however it's pronounced, like he wrote Waller fantastic in some of his runs.
I mean, that's why I put her in Midnighter. And I love that she doesn't really like fear anyone. Like that's the thing, like Batman always has a plan, but that famous Suicide Squad cover where she's like cussing out Batman, like to me that's Amanda Waller in an instant, like in one she is intimidated by no one. She's fallible. But again, like her origin, I mean, there's nothing, she doesn't have like a crazy origin. She just grew up in Cabrini Green and learned that she can really only rely on herself. And that's really real. And I think that she's super, super compelling. Her and Lois Lane. Love Lois as well.
Another character, I think she kind of gets undersold sometimes. Like how smart she is. Like they always kind of portray her as, well, it's Superman's girlfriend, Superman's wife, where like Rucka did his little Lois Lane miniseries where like, she was fantastic in it.
I mean, because to me, like that's the opposite. The thing about Lois is for all of Superman's everything that, he's Superman, but he's really Lois's husband, right? Like she's
her own person.
But she never tells the fact that he's Superman. Like, it depends what version of her. But to me, like the best versions are someone for whom like her will is so strong, her fortitude is so strong that you have this guy that's a god among men, and yet like this is who he falls for because he's in awe of her, and I think that's really, really powerful. I love Birthright, the
fantastic
Neil Yu book, where he saves her, and she's like, slips in the card and is like, people in danger, go save, we'll talk later. Like her priorities are always set. She doesn't fangirl Superman, and I think that's why they're together.
Yeah.
But I think Lois, I wanted Lois in the Justice League too, actually. So
was it hard to write Lobo into the Justice League? Because you mentioned that he was the one character that they made you put in the book, aside from Batman, I assume. But was he a choice that you would have made on your own anyways?
Honestly, probably not, but I came to really like him. So, and that's when things like that work out great. It was a challenge to see how he would fit in, but then I found, his sort of like friendship with Ryan, and his adversarial nature with Black Canary and Batman, and I found a lot to really like about him. And what I think is interesting what broke him for me is that he's a lot like some of my friends that I grew up with. Lobo often is written sort of like a dunce, but he's not. He's super intelligent. But that's just, he doesn't choose to lord it over everyone else. He wants to be just like a cigar smoking, frag off bike riding guy. But it doesn't mean he's stupid. And so once I realized that he might connect with Ryan over that, and he wouldn't know how to say it because he's a man, tough guy with no feelings. But like he takes Ryan on because he knows what it's like to have people judge you by your exterior. And I came to really like him for that reason. And I just love, he cares about nothing in the universe except for dolphins. And I was happy to get to finally reveal to people why that was in the annual. And then, Ryan's like his dolphin.
Yeah.
Steve, we're starting to run out of time. We're hitting the 1.5 hour mark, and I know Jen uses her phone. And it's probably about to die. Do you want to talk about the poll real quick?
We can talk about whatever you want. I got to grab some dinner soon too.
That's sweet. When's it coming out?
I think it's out early this month. TKO works different than different companies. That's all direct to readers. So I believe I want to say November 9th off the top of my head, but it's the first part of this month. We're shipping soon.
I really liked it. I enjoyed it. It's very hit and run with the world building, where it's like we don't dwell on it long. It's not like an exposition Hickman dump, as we call it, where it's just pages of explaining what's going on. I think it's Lopez, the artist.
Yeah, Lopez Ortiz.
It's very DBZ style, is what I'd call it. Moves quick moving book.
Yeah, yes. And Ricardo is amazing. His designs for that world were so good and so absurd in some ways. Like I love the bizarre mustaches that people in the sect have, and their weird ass hats and things like that. I loved working with Ricardo. We've been trying to do something since before I broke in like 2012. I had a pitch that was called like Live Dragons. And I don't even remember what it was about. And I was the asshole there because I got wrapped up and I couldn't write it for him. And then now, 6 years later, we're doing this book, finally, something completely different. But Ricardo did amazing design work. And he can draw anything. I really, I love an artist who I put something on the page and they just run with it. He's incredible. We need to mention Trina Farrell as well. The sort of neon Nicholas Winding Refn look at the book wouldn't exist without her. The whole thing, top to bottom, I'm just super excited for people to see. It is a large-scale anime comics crossover, told in a sci-fi lens. There's no superheroes, but there are bad people who think they're heroes in the poll.
Thank you very much for the preview copies you've been sending out. Very much appreciate giving us this opportunity to talk about it. And I highly recommend picking up the poll when it comes out. TKO's third wave, I guess this is what they're calling it now, of books coming out. Them and Mad Cave right now, kind of coming from like an underswell of like stuff you're not really looking for, but like the books coming out are solid right now. So definitely pick up Commanders in Crisis. And I know you've said you have like a groundswell of books that are like in your head, like ready to come out.
Commanders in Crisis, yes. TKO in the poll, yes. The only other thing I'll say, because I know we're wrapping up, Kill a Man, long gestating queer mixed martial arts graphic novel coming out this year from Aftershock. We're putting it to print in the next couple of weeks. It'll be out there. People who like Midnighter, people who like my work in general. My agent says that I am the one that offers like gay anger and
ganger.
And like it's my favorite book I've ever done. So make sure you follow that. Even if you're not a mixed martial arts fan, you will connect with the characters. And I'm incredibly proud of that. That should be out by the end of the year.
And your WWE Raw live tweeting.
I mean, that's every Monday, folks.
Thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to talk to you. Being a small channel, really appreciate having you on and talking comics with you and just in general. And went a little political, which I think, given the night it is, great to talk to me.
You've distracted me from it, so this is wonderful. Look, I'd love to come back. You guys will get a review copy of Kill a Man when it comes out, just like you're getting Command of the Crisis because you're on the list. I'd love to come back with Phil, my co-writer, if we can have 5 screens. I don't know how that works.
Oh no, we can have up to 6. 100%. Like, you've been great, and again, loving what you're putting out, and again, appreciate you coming on talking to us.
It's my pleasure. I'm going to go definitely not stress eat for the rest of the night.
Same.
And, thank you again, guys. And
thank you.
I sent an email. If you need anything else, just ask me. I'd be excited to come back and talk about Kill a Man once it's
not a problem. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Appreciate it. Please don't stress out tonight. Tomorrow, the world will go on. Hopefully, we'll have a new regime. It could be a couple of days. We never know.
We never know.
The mail-in votes. I mailed in vote, so
we'll be back.
But again, appreciate you and everybody else for joining us. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye.